Welcome to today's episode of Magnus Mindset Podcast, where it's our mission to help you grow in the skills, knowledge, and relationships to help you live your best. I'm your host, Tim Balo, and if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another podcast episode. So today we're talking about why do I worry? Well, according to the World Health Organization, Americans have the biggest problem with this issue more than any other people in any other country in the world. Which is sort of ironic to me because that means that the most affluent society in the world has the most worry in the entire world. Hey, congratulations, U.S. We win in the area of worry. That's probably not so great, right? According to Barna research, 60% of adults in the United States struggle with worry and stress daily. And over half of you that are listening to this right now, you are worried. In fact, your mind is probably drifting as you listen to this podcast right now. Here's what we want to talk about is when it comes to worry, what are we going to do in order to help manage the peace, the joy, the happiness in our life? Because I'm going to tell you right now, when it comes to worry, I know personally that it is always bigger and more consuming at night. Something about the darkness and that time of night where my mind is trying to connect all the dots, and it will just put me sometimes into, as I mentioned in the last episode, a panic attack. It's the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. conversation in my head that has me worrying. Everything seems a little smaller and a little easier in the light of day. Something to keep in mind. And I got to tell you, maybe you're like me where you've got maybe concerns for your kids. You want to make sure that they're going to be off and running to the great places in their lives, that they're going to be hanging, with good friends, not the wrong friends. Maybe your worry comes because of some health concerns. Maybe you got some bad news from the doctor recently telling you that you've got to lose the pounds, or maybe something more serious than that. Many of us struggle with that job stress, and we worry about maybe security of our job or the financial side of those things, or we just worry about the relationships at the job, or what am I going to do? Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Or maybe you're young and you haven't even found that career path that you wanted to go on. You're just kind of working a job and hoping that this is not what your life is going to look like. Many of us are concerned or worrying about aging parents. We're at that stage of life where now our kids are grown, and it's not that we stop worrying about them, but we also have now the other side of that where our aging parents have become more of a concern for us, and we're worrying about what that looks like as well. Now, just put over all the top of that the things that all of us can worry about, and that is these wars or rumors of wars. We see division all over the place. We see racism. We see terrorism, all of these things that are going all over the world if you are feeding on your news media and social media type things. Well, for crying out loud, just even the price of eggs and bread and milk at the grocery store probably has you a little bit worried. So what's the difference between, let's say, anxiety and worry? While they do overlap because they are sort of related, they are also different. And I don't want to just maybe oversimplify this, but catch this idea that we generally experience the anxiety in our bodies. As I mentioned in the last episode, a panic attack we feel in our bodies. We can have that feeling of dread or that crushing feel we can't breathe, whatever that looks like. We feel or experience anxiety typically in our bodies, while we tend to experience worry actually in our minds. Now, it's usually the worry in our minds that leads to that feeling in our body. Anxiety is also generally pretty broad in its sense. You can be anxious, for instance, about traveling, right? I just get really anxious even thinking about traveling, where worry would be often more specific. I worry that I'm going to miss my flight, or I worry that the roads getting to the airport are going to be slippery and messy, or lots of traffic, or whatever the case is. So my assignment here is to show you how to overcome that worry. Now, when it comes to our worry, there are really 5 biggest worries. Think about this. When you are in that place where you're worrying about something, it's typically going to be related to, well, I'll just start with a big one, finances. Maybe you've worried about that. You've worried about your finances. We worry about our food. What are we going to eat, right? How are we going to survive? What am I going to put on the table for the kids? And if you're like me, menu planning can stress you out. We often worry about our fitness. How am I doing in my health? What does that look like? Often we worry about our fashion, and that is, especially if you have kids, I need to be able to dress them appropriately. And it's not that we're hung up on, the latest brands or trends, but we definitely worry about our first impression, maybe going to a meeting, or first impression meeting new people, or what people think of us in the fashion that we have. And then that number 5 biggest worry, of course, is our future. I don't know what it's going to look like. And I literally just went through this last night in my own brain, where it's, what is that going to look like in, 10 years? I don't need to know what A to Z looks like. I just need to know what A to B looks like. And oftentimes we can get really, really worried about our future, and it can really distract us from the present. So when we're talking about this idea of worry, it is focusing on what's beyond our control, and that results in, honestly, inaction. When we are stewing about it without doing anything about it, that's worry. Now, there's a difference between when it comes to worry and our concern. So worry, as I said, is focusing on what's beyond our control, which results in inaction. Concern focuses on a challenge, and we move to action. So here's my challenge. Switch up your thinking so that we're not worried about it, that which is beyond our control, and then results in inaction, but instead say, hey, I have a concern, and that focuses on the immediate challenge and allows us to have action steps to move on. So for instance, if your marriage is struggling or you have other relational issues that are going on, that is a concern, and you would go to perhaps get counseling, talk about it, work some things out. If you have a worry about your weight, you would make that a concern because you've gained so many pounds. So the concern is recognize the challenge. What is the action step that I'm going to do? I'm going to cut back on soft drinks or the froofy coffee things, or I'm going to watch my portions. I'm going to move to action because I recognize the challenge. When you just worry on the things that are beyond your control and that results in inaction, nothing gets better. But in fact, your mental health actually gets worse. So just look at the natural world, for instance. We have bird feeders right next to our large windows here. I should probably call them squirrel feeders because that's really who's kind of ransacking the place. But what we've noticed is of all the birds and the squirrels that come to our feeders, I have never seen any of them worry. Birds don't sit around all day doing nothing. When birds are hungry, what do? They don't wait for the food to drop into their nest. They get up, they fly around, they find some food, like at my feeder, they eat, they fly around, they sleep, they fly around. I have never in my life ever heard a bird at night walking around, pacing the nest, saying, gee, I sure hope that there's not a supply chain problem that's going to result in a shortage of bird seed. They don't worry. They move from one day to the next and look for the opportunities to do something about it. When we're worrying, we're basically stealing our opportunity for tomorrow's joy. When we're worrying, we cannot focus on the joy, the happiness, the opportunities, all those kinds of things. We're caught up in the things that we cannot control, and we lead typically to inaction. Did you know, this is interesting because when it comes to what we worry about, that 91%, this is from research, it's at Penn State, they came up with this study and they found out that the fears that we have, the worries that we contend with, 91% of those worries will never come true. 91% of the things that you and I worry about is our imagination. Less than 10% of what you worry about will actually happen. And that might be, you're able to identify those things by sort of connecting the dots or seeing where your life is. And if you don't do anything, this is what it could lead to. But when you worry, it actually robs your peace 100% of the time. So it may never happen. That's one thing you need to keep in mind. When we're worrying, identify the fact that just say it out loud to you. Hey, you know what? That may never happen. And that will give you some relief right then, right there. Hey, this may never happen. Now, it may happen, but it won't be as bad as you thought. Again, we're at that 10% of what you worry about that actually does happen. Yeah, I didn't get to do great on that presentation. Okay. Does it really matter that much? hey, I'm going to ask her out. I'm going to ask him out. What if they say no? Well, if they do, life goes on. So when it comes to the worries, hey, some of it may never happen. You can say that out loud. Some of it may happen, but it won't be as bad as you thought. And the last category is, hey, it may happen, and you will get through it. You will get through it. Regardless of what happens, you will learn. And I like to use the phrase, I will fail forward. I'm not going to just let this be an incident. I'm going to learn from this because it did happen. What can I learn? How can I grow? And how can I move forward? Because the next time something else comes up and you are worried, and though it may not even be on the related topic, you know that you have the skills and the ability, the relationships and the knowledge to be able to grow forward. So, if you're worried today, just remember, as warriors, we can plan, but we will not worry. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you share it with a friend. Again, remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the episodes of this podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.